Crispus Attucks was the first person to die for American independence. And the story of how America has remembered him, more chosen to forget him, is as revolutionary as the war he helped spark. Born around 1723 in Framingham, Massachusetts, Crispus Attucks was a guy straddling two worlds. His mother was likely from the Wampanoag or Natick tribe, indigenous to the very land the colonists were settling. His father was an enslaved African, brought to America in chains. Attucks himself was born into slavery, but freedom called to him from the sea. He escaped his enslaver and for 20 years lived the rough-and-tumble life of a sailor and dockworker, a free man making his own way. He sailed on whaling voyages, worked the ports, and navigated a world that saw him as less than human. His very existence was an act of defiance. Then came March 5th, 1770. The city of Boston was a pressure cooker. British soldiers, the redcoats, were everywhere, a constant reminder of colonial subjugation. Tensions were sky high. That snowy evening, a confrontation erupted on King Street between a lone British sentry and a crowd of angry Bostonians. The crowd swelled, throwing insults, snowballs, and oyster shells, with Crispus Attucks leading the chaos. At 6'2", he was an imposing figure, and witnesses said he was a leader of the group, challenging the soldiers' authority. Suddenly, a shot rang out, and then another, and another. After the chaos, 5 colonists lay dead or badly hurt on the cobblestones. The first was Crispus Attucks, a key figure in this tragedy. He was shot twice in the chest, becoming the first casualty of what we now call the Boston Massacre. And in that moment, he also became the first martyr of the American Revolution. His death helped ignite the flames of rebellion that would lead to the Declaration of Independence just 6 years later. You'd think a guy who sacrificed everything for freedom would be celebrated everywhere, right? Well, this is where the story gets complicated. Almost immediately, the battle over Crispus Attucks' legacy began, and it was a battle fought over his race. In the immediate aftermath, colonial leaders like John Adams, who, ironically, defended the British soldiers in court, used Attucks' race against him. To win his case, Adams painted the crowd as an unruly mob and singled out Attucks. He described him in court as a stout mulatto fellow, whose very looks was enough to terrify any person. He portrayed Attucks not as a patriot, but as a rabble-rouser, an outsider who provoked the violence. By highlighting his mixed race, Adams tried to delegitimize the protesters' cause, suggesting that only lawless outsiders would dare challenge British authority. The strategy worked. The soldiers were acquitted of murder. And just like that, the first hero of the revolution was posthumously put on trial for his own death. For years after the revolution, history books often ignored Attucks' role. When he was mentioned, he was often stripped of his identity, referred to simply as a mulatto or a nameless ruffian. White historians, busy constructing a narrative of a unified, virtuous founding, had little room for a black and Native American man at the center of their story. Recognizing Attucks means facing the tough truth that a man who fought for freedom didn't get its full benefits just because of his skin color. It was easier to just write him out of the script. But while the official narrative tried to erase him, black communities never forgot. For them, Crispus Attucks was not a troublemaker. He was a hero. He was proof that African Americans had been present and accounted for at the nation's founding, shedding the first blood for a country that enslaved them. In the early 1800s, black Bostonians celebrated Crispus Attucks Day on March 5th as a bold stand against oppression. They used Attucks' story to argue for their own citizenship, for their right to be seen as Americans. The movement really took off with the abolitionist cause in the 1840s and 50s. Abolitionists like William Cooper Nell, a prominent black historian, championed Attucks as a founding martyr. They published pamphlets, gave speeches, and demanded that Faneuil Hall, the so-called cradle of liberty, be opened for their commemorations. By elevating Attucks, they were making a brilliant argument. How could America deny freedom and citizenship to black people when a black man was the first to die for the nation's freedom? They turned John Adams's racist courtroom tactics on their head. Attucks' blackness was not a source of shame. It was a badge of honor, a symbol of ultimate patriotic sacrifice. The debate raged for decades, when activists proposed a monument to the Boston Massacre victims in the 1880s. The idea was met with fierce opposition. The Massachusetts Historical Society and others made their case that the massacre was nothing more than a riot started by a motley rabble, and that honoring someone like Attucks would be a disgrace. The fight over the statue was a fight over America's soul. Who gets to be a hero? Whose story is worth telling? In the end, the activists won. In 1888, the Boston Massacre Monument was erected on the Boston Common, with the names of all 5 victims, including Crispus Attucks, inscribed on its base. It was a monumental victory, literally. It marked a turning point, forcing a public acknowledgement of Attucks' role. From that point on, he began to reappear in textbooks, though often in a sanitized way. He was a patriot? Yes. His unique mix of black and native heritage, along with the simple fact that he lived freely, often got overlooked. Attucks saw a revival during the 20th century civil rights movement. Activists saw him as a powerful symbol of black protest and sacrifice. In 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. evoked his name in his speech, The Drum Major Instinct, just 2 months before his assassination, reminding the world that the African American struggle for justice was as old as the nation itself. He said, "He is one of the heroes of American history. He was a fugitive slave, and he died at the hands of the British." Dr. King saw Attucks' story as proof that black people weren't just bystanders in history. They were the ones shaping it. So, who was Crispus Attucks? Was he a heroic patriot? A lawless agitator? A symbol of black liberation? A forgotten Native American? The answer is, he was all of these things. His story is a mirror reflecting America's deepest contradictions. A nation conceived in liberty that was built on slavery, a country that celebrates its revolutionaries, but has often been deeply uncomfortable with real-life rebellion, especially when it comes from people of color. Crispus Attucks' legacy proves history is more than just facts. It's a story we tell ourselves about who we are and who we want to be. For more than 250 years, various groups have tried to claim Attucks, molding his identity to match their idea of America. He was a ruffian to those who feared change, a martyr to those who fought for freedom, and a ghost to those who preferred a simpler, cleaner version of the past. But Crispus Attucks was not a ghost. He was a man of flesh and blood, a man who escaped bondage and died fighting for a liberty he never fully knew. His story challenges us to look beyond the sanitized pages of our textbooks and grapple with the messy, complicated, and often painful reality of American history. He reminds us that the fight for freedom, equality, and recognition has been here from the very beginning. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden corners of history. Let me know if this is the first time you've heard this story. Comment first and share your thoughts.